What's going on, everyone? So, at the end of season 3, episode 10, you saw Jim meet his end. Julie trying to save him, frantically running up to him, like saying, I think this is the moment that happens. You got to get out of here. And then, boom, the man in yellow shows up and ends up taking out Jim. Now, a lot of people think that Jim didn't really die, or at least in the time in which we, like in the real time, right? Like that's kind of like a future event, right? A lot of people point to him going to the RV, right? How far was the RV from where they were over by the ruins and stuff, like, or by the bottle tree, right? Is that something where he just kind of, is it really like, a couple yards or however far he walked? Did he really walk that far to like get away? I mean, maybe, if he's just kind of wandering, trying to clear his thoughts, trying to clear his head, right? Like, he's kind of taking everything in. You can see that, okay, maybe it's a possibility. But I do think that, one, they probably should just keep, we already watched him die. We saw him die. And we saw that Julie is unable to change the story. I think that is important. I think that is something significant. And I think that since you already killed Jim, and everyone's kind of okay with it. Like, it's not like people aren't like furious about it or anything like that. Where, you've seen in other shows, they'll kill a character and people are outraged by it or bothered by it. Or, you'll hear all like the Reddit forums and stuff like that. And, they'll bring them back if they can make it make sense. Right. I don't think that that's happened. At least nothing that I've seen, nothing I heard. Everyone was just kind of like, okay, yeah. Like, I also think it was kind of expected that Jim was going to die, right? Like, it just felt like they were leading his character down that path, particularly in this last season. But beyond him being dead, right? Let's assume that he is dead. That doesn't mean that he can't still be in the show, as we've seen. And what I mean by that is you've had characters, Father Kotri is probably the best example, that have died. And other characters that are alive see them and conversate and talk to them regularly, right? The big question has always been, is it actually them? Or is it, some being in FROMVILLE? Is it, the boy in white kind of masquerading and operating as, like, what is it? How is it? Right? Like, there's a lot of kind of conversation to be had surrounding that. And, I don't think it would be far-fetched to, okay, Jim died, Julie saw Jim die, and now Julie's kind of seeing the sort of force ghost of her father. And having communication, having dialogue, and maybe even getting key information and key details. And, maybe he even kind of follows her along because he's kind of attached to her or glued to her and that, right? Because Boyd was right there when Father Kotri died. So who's to say that Father Kotri isn't linked to Boyd? What if something similar happens, right? Julie was right there when her father died in a very similar manner, right? So what if Jim ends up being this kind of, angel on Julie's shoulder, and she's like trying to navigate time and trying to solve stuff, and he's just like, listen, like this isn't what you should be doing, and kind of like tries to, be fatherly. And like I said, maybe gives her information, gives her details, helps her out, right? Like, is kind of, again, kind of the voice of reason to her in a lot of ways. I think that's something that could be very interesting and could make for kind of an interesting direction for FROMVILLE to go. And it gives you a way to kind of keep that character around, right? And it's like, okay, well, why did Tian and these other characters, why didn't we see them? Well, because again, like, you don't have the connection, and you can justify it and have it be through, that connection. And again, Boyd was right there. He was closest to Father Kotri. They were supposed to save everybody together. They were, the two peas in a pod. He, Father Kotri essentially died in his arms, right? Same thing. Not essentially. He did. And, it's very similar with Julie, right? Julie was there. Julie tried to save him. She wasn't able to save him, right? He died in a very similar manner to Father Kotri, right? She's there. Maybe the man in yellow disappears after, and she's just holding her dad while her dad dies. And it kind of just causes this connection. It kind of causes this tie-in to where that could be kind of the explanation, justification. Also, it makes sense for like the connection, right? Like, it's his daughter, right? Like, it would make sense that if he was going to reveal himself to anybody, it'd be his daughter, right? Maybe Tabitha even sees him, right? Maybe even Tabitha has some type of connection and, is able to see Jim and have conversations with Jim after he dies. And when she comes to the realization, like, oh, he's dead. I think that there's several ways that you can kind of go about this and approach it. But I think the kid element and the kid dynamic would be kind of unique. Also, like, what if Jim ends up being the one that starts making phone calls and stuff, right? And Ethan answers the phone and, he's like, oh, I already, I knew, like, we already went over this type thing. I know first it was my brother. Now it's my dad. Oh, I know it's not. And like, you could have this kind of conflict. And I think also from a story standpoint and from like an audience viewer standpoint, right? I think that can make for an interesting kind of dynamic as well. Because it's kind of like, okay, it can't be Jim. It's not Jim. No way it's Jim, right? Like, it's got to be this place kind of trying to manipulate the children into doing something stupid or, gaining their trust, right? So now it becomes this sort of red herring, for the characters, and could make for, like I mentioned, a unique kind of twist and take on, okay, like, he was the one that was getting the phone calls and talking on the CB radio and all this stuff, to now he's the one that's talking through it to his son and his daughter and maybe even Tabitha and stuff. And us from an audience standpoint, we're like, no, it's not them. Don't do this. Don't do that. But maybe Jim's kind of advising and helping and, trying to keep his family alive and keep his family safe, even through death. And I think that there's several kind of approaches that you could take with Jim in this space of, being dead. Now, obviously there is the possibility that he's just not, and, and what people think is happening actually does happen. Maybe it is a different timeline, right? Because obviously Julie is very different. Julie does not look like Julie. She's got shorter hair. She's got a scratch on her face, right? From probably a monster or something like that. So it would kind of make sense that there would be this sort of, like time gap, right? There'd be this like that's a different time than what we picked on from, right? And it kind of cut away to it. So it's just like, they can essentially fill in whatever they need to fill in or whatever they want to fill in and however they want to fill it in, right? Is the point. But I'm curious to see, like, which direction do they go with that, right? Is he alive? Is he dead? If he is dead, does that mean he's just like, they're just not going to have him in the show anymore? Or do they kind of tie him in the way that they did with like Father Kotri? And, we've seen several, I mean, even Abby and stuff, right? I mean, most of it has kind of been centered around Jim, but that doesn't mean that others might not have that connection. I mean, Jade, seeing Tom and stuff like that. So you have characters that have had those kind of run-ins. And it's kind of like, okay, like, what is this? How is this, right? And it would make sense that, okay, Jim dies at the hands of the man in yellow, right? Which I don't want to see change. I don't want them to change it because we already went through it. Like, as soon as you start doing stuff and you start changing things, you start going back on stuff, right? It opens the door for a bunch of other things. Now, all of a sudden, they take out Boyd or something, and then it's like, oh, well, we shouldn't have done that. So, and you just start retconning and changing all this stuff, and time travel starts getting crazy and carried away. It's just, I don't want the show to become that. If you do something, stick with it, live with it, whether people love it or not, right? As soon as you start trying to fix things and, alter things and make changes stuff, right? Like, it's silly. Where I'd rather them kind of stay the course. Jim died. If you want to still have moments with Jim, that's fine. You have a already built-in inherent way to do so. Let it be that way. Right? The other route is I've talked about, maybe the man in yellow kind of possessing Jim. That could be kind of an interesting element as well. But I talked about that in a previous video, so go check out that video if you're interested in maybe Jim potentially being possessed by the man in yellow, which I think would make for a very interesting route. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you like to see him as like that Force ghost or whatever? Do you think no, absolutely not? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it either way, so let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.